Really quickly. I never dreamed that I would serve really the last 12 years. It's gone very quickly. But what I've found is these issues, generally you're unsuccessful the first time, and it takes time. Our process is intentionally meant to be slow, and change is slow, which is a good thing. But I think it takes time. We've got a lot of initiatives, I think, really, particularly in value adding to our minerals, and our savings plan, which I was able to convince the legislature in 2004, and we've more than doubled the size of the permanent mineral trust fund. We're going to double it again. The plan was 4 by 10 by 2010 to take the permanent mineral trust fund to $4 billion. I think we'll go to $8 billion by 2018. And that's only saving just over a third of the severance tax. People think we're spending most of the severance tax, and we're spending all the sales and use tax, and spending all the federal mineral royalties. So sometimes we get criticized for stuffing money under a mattress. But I think 2003, the state of Wyoming received $50 million in revenue from the permanent mineral trust fund. This past year was over $400 million. And that's almost permanently guaranteed us that we're not going to have a state income tax. And if so, we can really endow ourselves by saving a little bit. And other states are doing similar things. North Dakota now, with their mineral boom, has got on board on this. And so I think that's an important thing. And there's a lot of these issues I've worked on. But let's face it. I mean, I know my service is not as important as the Wyoming House of Representatives. They'll go on long after I'm gone. They're going on long before I was there. But I would like to say that I've worked hard at it. I've had a real passion, I think, and I think it's like any other thing that any of us go into. I think if you work hard into it, you throw your passion into it, I think you can do some good. And I've tried to do some good and use some common sense. So I really would like to continue on with some of the things we've gotten started, I think, in education and really our whole fiscal planning.
Describe a vote you've made that you do differently if you got the chance.
I think probably it's a good question, I guess. There's probably several, I think, but the one that sticks out in my mind most is particularly on DUIs, and where we can really now, you're allowed to strap you down literally and take your blood. And I just think that's such an invasive search. And I think it's a tough call. Now, nobody's in favor of drunks on the road, and it's caused a lot of havoc and destroyed a lot of lives. But I think that's one that's close, I think. I've had second thoughts about that. But I don't think we're going back. I don't think there's a will in the legislature to turn that around. I haven't felt that or heard that. I think that's probably that's the single most one on just on a search issue. I think there's always issues like it's tough. You have to decide on expansion of Medicaid and DD waivers and all those things. And the thing that I guess I've found in my 8 years on appropriations, and I've chaired the last 2 years, we can't do everything. There's just some things we can't solve. And I tell folks we can probably do anything that we want. I mean, if there's something an initiative, but I don't think we can do everything. And there are so many issues and needs, and so you try to make judgments and you try to do the best you can. And I think there's probably a lot of those issues where you'd like to fully fund DD waivers, you'd like to fully fund things here and there, but you just can't do it all. And you have to kind of look at that whole growth and that whole thing of government and what we can sustain and what's proper.
Legislators hiked the gas tax to increase funding for roads, but the boost is only a small Band-Aid on a large, important problem. What would you propose for highway funding?
Well, I think I'm glad you asked me that question, because the fuel tax is assessed at the distributor level. I think most of us think that it's at the local gas station, and really it's at the distributor level. There's about 280, and it's like 282 or 284 distributors in Wyoming, 240, 80% of them are out-of-state corporations. So they distribute fuel to all our neighboring states. And, you know, I think it's Friedman, the first Econ 101 lesson you learn in disparate taxing jurisdictions, the supplier, the big guy, wins. They don't pass that on to the lower tax jurisdiction. And so and we did a lot of work on this and a lot of economic studies, and really it came down to this: we were paying the tax, we just weren't collecting it. And those 80%, 240 out-of-state corporations, that's the cost of doing business. And they've passed that on to a lot of different people, including many, many out-of-state folks. And the University of Wyoming study really proved that. And 6 months after the gas tax, they attributed the hike in gasoline 1 penny to the 10-cent gas tax and 5 pennies on diesel. And then with that, and I know 100% of us pay it, all of us in Casper, we don't fill up in Spearfish or Denver or anywhere else, but of the total tax paid then, that is truly paid, 53% of that is folks traveling through the state. I mean, so, and I know it's 100% of us, but really that's spread out through, you know, 240 distributors who are out-of-state corporations. And and part of that's huge. That's a huge help. And there are no administrative costs so WYDOT accounts for that 10 cents and a different line item in their budget. It is 100% pavement. Good Wyoming jobs laying pavement today somewhere in Wyoming. So there's no admin, there's no planning, there's no other fees come out of it. And then I think that's about 2/3 goes to WYDOT, 67%. The other third really goes to local governments. You see all the county road projects and city road projects in Casper, that's a result of that. And then there's about 0.5% that goes to ATV trail maintenance, because they pay the tax too. They pay more than 0.5%. Snowmobiles, about 0.5%, and then about a little under 0.5% to motorboat facilities. Those folks all pay more than that in tax to run those. And we know how important snowmobiling is in Wyoming's tourism economy in the winter. It's about the only thing going. So I think it was the right thing. And I know it's easy to throw that out there that you hike taxes, but really, I think we were paying the tax. We just really weren't collecting it, and I think studies have shown that. Long term, I think, let's face it, we're dependent on the federal government for the interstate highway system in the U.S. We have such a wide expanse and miles of roads with not very many people. And so we are a net federal gas tax recipient, or to the positive. We receive, I don't know, it's like $1.50 for every dollar that's paid out of Wyoming to maintain I-80 and I-25 and the U.S. highways. So that's an important part. They're going to play an important role in this. And unfortunately, our federal government's not run as well as the Wyoming state government. And there's a lot of question marks. You know, there's a lot of issues. Do you toll big trucks? I don't know. You know, we've debated it. It hasn't gotten the traction yet. Are there other ways to do that? There's ton-mile taxes that some states have done. I don't know the answer to it. Fuel tax has been the one, but I think we've done a lot of good. I really do. I think that penny is about $70-some million, or that 10 cents about $70 million. It's made a difference. There's no doubt.
What should Wyoming do to strengthen its market for its natural resources and specifically coal?
I tell you, I've been a real leader on that issue, and you know, and some folks are out there saying transfer more federal lands, Thunder Basin natural gas land to the state. The issue is not mining coal. We can get to the coal, and the feds have not slowed down the permitting for coal. That's not been an issue. It's getting people to buy the coal. That's the issue. I mean, we have 500 years of coal. So how do we somehow convince utility companies to keep building coal plants? Because they're aging every day, and there's only about 2 out there that are being built. And that's the real issue. And I'm a skeptic. I mean, I know climate, the only thing about climate is it does change. We know that. But the role that coal plays in that, coal's gotten cleaner every decade. So how do we take the cleanest coal in the world, Wyoming coal? I think we'd have to get on board, and we've done this for years. Clean Coal Task Force, University of Wyoming, our School of Energy Resources. We've done commercial scale sequestration as part of it. Advanced oil recovery right here in Natrona County. What's happened in the Salt Creek oil field when Anadarko owned the field, and the sequestration of millions of tons of CO2 has squeezed oil out, where, you know, that's made a real difference to Natrona County and to our county and county budgets. And so all that's a part of it. And the other piece of this is exporting coal. And it's probably going to get settled in the courts, you know, and I made an amendment, got it in the budget for $500,000 in a coal port litigation fund. And whether it's, you know, violate the Interstate Commerce Act or international trade agreements, you know, I don't think it's right for our sister states to just stop the export of American products. And so that's part of it. I think China, South Korea will buy as much coal as we can ship, and it'd be a long-term deal. And we certainly want them burning clean Wyoming coal as opposed to other coal sources that they have access to. But I do believe our technology's got to be a part of this. And then an amendment I authored in the budget this year that has set up really our whole X Prize, where industry is set up, put aside money to get entrepreneurs to come in and get the smartest people in the world who can do carbon capture, sequestration, all those issues, find the solutions on a commercial scale, bolt on right to a Wyoming power plant. That's going on as we speak. I mean, that process is in motion. It's a huge part, because CO2 is a valuable gas. I mean, if we can somehow capture it, clean it, and use it efficiently, it'll be another resource for Wyoming. So, but there's a lot of work to do. So there's a lot of work on us in Wyoming talking about our clean coal. And there's a lot of work with international markets. There's probably going to be work, unfortunately, in the courts to settle a lot of these export issues. But I think a huge issue is really building more coal plants. Still generating 39–40% of our power. That's what's made this country strong, is reliable, dependable, cheap energy. And it's not going to happen, I think, with wind power and solar. I mean, I think all the above on those, and I've really pushed hard with our uraniums, you know, our nuclear power generation and production. We have the largest uranium resources in the United States here in Wyoming, and I think it's going to have to be a mix into the future.
What would you as a legislator do to improve education in Wyoming?
You know, I think, first of all, Wyoming is somewhat unique among states. There's a few of us have similar state constitutions, but some states, you go Texas, others, there's a state textbook. It's a state curriculum. Wyoming is prohibited from that in our state constitution. The legislature nor the superintendent can prescribe textbooks and curriculum. So local control of education is a bedrock in this state. The thing that has really changed, I think, since the 70s with the Washakie and Campbell decisions is really this whole equal access and equality. And is the wealth in Campbell County just Campbell County School District number 1, or does it belong to all of the state of Wyoming? And the courts have been clear about that. That just because you might live in Niobrara County and don't have the resources, that your kids should have same access to education as the kids in Campbell County or sublet. And so through all those court decisions, they've put a lot of decisions in the legislature. They haven't put them in the governor's office or the superintendent's office anywhere. It's square onto the legislature and told us that is our number one duty. We've done a lot of work. So really the funding model comes from the legislature. We pull all this taxes, local taxes like folks have always paid. And then we have the Campbell counties, the sublets, who really overpay and make up the difference in counties like Natrona County and Niobrara and those places. So we're only paying, I think, in this county about 80% of the cost of our kids' education. The rest is paid through other counties in the state and through federal mineral royalties. So that's kind of the background where we're at. Now, what we can do, I think part of this thing, part of the problem with all this, K-12 has gotten politicized. And, you know, whether it's Game and Fish or YDOT or the University of Wyoming, everybody has their favorite whipping boy out there with politics. It's easy to talk bad about Game and Fish or YDOT and or the university's not doing this or that. The University of Laramie, you know, you'll hear it referred to, and all these institutions in our state. And the thing I'm probably most concerned about is we're starting to do that with K-12. And people are using that for political purposes. And the facts are this, you know, there is no way to compare our kids straight across to kids around the country, every kid, because we're all doing different tests. No Child Left Behind allowed each state to develop their own accountability measures. Well, there's a couple ways so that a sample of our Wyoming kids take the NWA test. It's and we're always scoring the top 10. We test third and eighth graders, 8th graders, and 11th graders. There's only 8 states, I think, that test every junior student on the ACT. The rest just test college-bound kids, but there's 8 states that test every junior. I think we're 3rd out of those 8. We have some of the best schools in the world in this state. We have some of the smartest kids in the world. And you don't hear that very often. It's always about how our schools are underperforming and under this and that. And so, and part of that, we set up a rigorous plan with the original YCAS, which was changed under a previous superintendent, now the pause test. But so I think part of what the legislature can continue to do is, I think, give some kind of certainty and continuity to districts on the funding piece. Okay, and then I think the other thing is back off a little bit on your rhetoric, and then I think finally the accountability processes that we have in place are good, and the whole idea is to get us out from under No Child Left Behind. And as we have this Wyoming accountability model, because the school I teach at, Natrona County High School, you know, 1,800, when you have the 200 adults there and 1,800 kids, it's like the 15th largest city in Wyoming on Monday through Friday during the school year. And then you have little tiny Arvada Claremont. And how can you put everybody into some kind of algorithm for an accountability measure through No Child Left Behind? It's very difficult. And so we've designed this Wyoming accountability model. It will replace No Child Left Behind. It's a group of 30, 40 people sitting in a room and making real decisions about and using certain parameters. And so I think we're really on the right track with that, and to really give parents and policymakers a scorecard on our schools and really have a way to compare. But we've done a lot of good. We really have. And I know there's been so much going on with the superintendent and all these other issues that have distracted us really from important work that needs to be done. But I think the bottom line is, it's the local school boards that we're going to elect in November. As parents, they decide, you know, really what gets taught. They pick the textbooks. All 48 school districts pick different textbooks. They're going to hire their own teachers and their own administrators, and parents are going to figure out through their school board members, who they want teaching their kids. And that's really where the power's at. There's a funding power in Cheyenne, you're right, and I think we got to provide the consistency. But where the rubber meets the road is still at the districts, and it's going to maintain there, I think. It's just going to.
Going back to one of the whipping boys you mentioned, Game and Fish funding, also an ongoing problem, with the department stuck between rising costs and capped fees. What would you propose as a solution for the department's funding woes?
You know, that's a tough deal, and I voted against fee increases the last time around. And here's the problem: is that you have deer, elk, and antelope hunters that are the only ones who make a profit, and they fund the entire Game and Fish. Even us fishermen don't buy enough licenses to operate the fisheries and the fish management in the state. So deer, elk, and antelope hunters are paying the bill for everything else. And here's the real issue is Game and Fish doesn't just manage the sport species we know about. They manage everything. They manage every species in our border. So they manage the sage grouse and the jumping mouse and now the wolf and the grizzly bears that the federal government put back into the state. And so all those things are on the books for them, and they all cost money. The legislature passes the invasive mussel program. I opposed it. I didn't think it was necessary, but it's another cost. And so you got all these things that have really grown the game and fish, and frankly, a lot of it's out of their control. A lot of it's been done by the feds. Some of it's been done by the legislature. And so my point is this. I think we got to get back we all talk about user fees. Well, let's be honest about user fees, and let's not make deer, elk, and antelope hunters continue to pay for things that aren't even close to their issues. I think we're going to have to take some of those things out of the general fund, and we've started to do that. The second issue, I think, is when we became a state, we have all these state lands, and not all of them are school sections. Some are University of Wyoming sections. We're a land-grant university. Some are fish hatchery sections. Before we even had a game and fish, our founders knew that would be an issue. And so there's lands out there working. There's permanent funds that are invested at a higher rate of return that we allow in Wyoming. And we started this in this last budget that I chaired, adding money to this game and fish permanent fund. They have their own little statutory fund that was set up years ago, but it doesn't draw the same rate of return because it's not a permanent constitutional fund. It can't be invested in the same way. And so I think that's part of the answer too. We need to, during good times, invest a little bit so we can permanently endow some of these programs. But I guess when any of these things get in trouble, the first deal is you cut costs, and they're right in the middle of that. They've trimmed a lot. They've cut a lot of costs, and they were cutting some programs. And I think also we got to analyze next the whole restructure and really what they should do and what we can help them with.
What's your philosophy and decision-making process when voting on a controversial issue or regarding an issue on which you have no strong stance?
That's a good question. I think I think the most important thing I try to read every bill. I mean, there are so many issues, and you just have to become good at reading bills. And I think it's difficult, and it takes a lot of work. But once you've kind of gone through this process, a lot of the issues don't change. A lot of the issues we debate now in 2014 are the same issues at statehood. It's going to be about our families and our communities and mineral rights and ag and water and all those things. And so you've there's not too many that you haven't heard. I mean, you've been there and heard that before. But my thing on this, on those controversial or things that really maybe are non-controversial, I think, number one, read the bill. Number two, I think, is just they're calling the roll call vote. I mean, you gotta have some foundation to you, some base that you really believe in, and I think use some common sense. What most people in Wyoming really want. And I think that's it. I mean, I was born in Casper, raised in the Midwest. I'm probably the only guy in the legislature who's had a pair of rod wrenches in my hand and worked on an oil rig. I don't know that anybody has. I know what that is. I know what about docking sheep is. And I've been through some of these things and had some life experiences in Wyoming. I'm all about keeping Wyoming the way it is. It's the way America used to be, in my opinion. And so I'm not one of these guys who wants to grow Wyoming off the map and make us like the Front Range of Colorado. I don't think anybody wants to see that. And so I think part of this mission, and that I see it, is to really preserve Wyoming. And, so I think when it comes down to those issues, that's where I'm at on it. I mean, is this something we need? Is this where we want to take Wyoming in the future? And so I think a lot of no votes are important as well.
What should the state's role be in economic development?
I'm sorry?
What should the state's role be in economic development?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think the last 10 years we've done a good job, I think, with the Wyoming Business Council. We've done a lot of infrastructure things that's benefited this community, and Salt Creek Heights, all these things around our community, and really every community in the state has benefited. And we've become business ready. And there's a role, everybody's in the game out there. Every state is. And I think, it's important. We've had a lot of different There's a lot of mechanisms. It's not one state mechanism. We allow locals a lot of latitude, and the business council works with them and does that. And then these have to be approved by the 5 elected officials, the SLIB board. So I don't think there's any one kind of. We've got a whole mix of programs across the state. I think that our next challenge is really what happens when the really big one wants to come to Wyoming. What if the largest gun maker in the world wants to leave the East Coast and come to Wyoming? I think it's too big for the business council. You know what I mean? And the Amendment 4 process, which we instituted again this year, was voted on into the Wyoming Constitution by the voters in the 70s. Hasn't been used for a couple decades, frankly. We were so broke and in such a depressed economy. And I think we've got to do that. I mean, I think it's got to be a constitutional mechanism like we did. We've got to vote on it, got to fully vet it. And I think that's the role of the big things. I think we've done a lot of good around the state. Some of that mission might be coming to an end, that the business count with business-ready communities and so on. But I think you hear the phrase picking winners and losers. I don't think that's been the case. I think it's been more partnerships. And I think that's an easy thing to throw out there. But I drive by on Outer Drive, and you see a big water project going in on the east side, and 80% of that's paid for by the state. There's going to be private developers that are going to benefit from that, but we do that everywhere. That's been our state law. We're paying 80% of the Gillette-Madison project. We paid 80% of the Midwest Wyoming water project, and that's what we do as a state. Now, if you wanted to say this picking winners and losers, well, certainly those private landowners next to that water project are going to benefit more than any of us will. But I don't think that's the point. I think it's going to. Some of these things are going to develop and move forward a little bit in Wyoming. I think it's proper. So I think we've done a lot of good. But I think again, the next frontier are these really big opportunities, and when and if they come. And I think the Amendment 4, the constitutional process that the voters have put in place in Wyoming, is really the way to go.
Finally, wrap it up. Why should we choose you over your opponent?
Well, I think number one, the legislature is bigger than any individual service. So let me say that. You know what I mean? And so if I don't go back to Cheyenne, they're still going to gavel in January and be just fine without me. I would ask people, though, hey, has the guy worked hard? Has he done a good job? Has he tried to use some little common sense? And I think I have. I've worked hard at it. I'm a hard-working legislator. I work hard at everything I do. I think I've got some good experience. I mean, I think I've got good life experiences I talked to you a little bit about. And shoot, I love Wyoming. I mean, I'm born and raised here. All my 4 kids I've raised here. And I'm into preserving. This is a precious state. Colorado is what I call out of the box. I mean, what's going on in Denver and Boulder and the whole population thing has changed that state forever. It's not going back. And you see some of that in Utah going on and Montana. And I think there's a niche for Wyoming to continue to move forward, provide great opportunities for our young people so we don't have to export our kids out of the state. But I don't think we need to, it's not a mission to really fundamentally change Wyoming. There's a lot of freedom in this state. And people love that, and I love that. So I think, number one, I'm going to get more done. That's why you should pick me. Number two, I'm going to work hard at it, and I think I've been very effective. Some of the stuff I've done has changed the state. The Hathaway Scholarship is here because of my efforts. And is it teamwork to get these passed? Absolutely, majority vote, but somebody's carrying the ball on the thing. Full-day kindergarten, I carry that ball across it. And that benefits kids. We're just starting to see that. And so I've had some biggies. And I think this whole thing, what we've done with the Permanent Trust Fund, it's happened because of my debate and work, frankly. And so I want to continue to work on those things. But I think, above all, I'm all about preserving this precious state. And that's it. I mean, and so when we leave this and turn this over to our kids, it's better. It's not fundamentally different, or has gotten out of the box, so to speak, and can never be returned to the way it was.
Steve Harshman,
Okay.
thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the time and the opportunity.